Welcome, welcome, Fionn. I am going to ask you a really rude question that men are never allowed to ask women, but I'm just going to jump in and ask you it anyway. So you invented your solution at age 18. How old are you now?
Now I'm 23, and actually I didn't invent this at 18. At 18 I kind of showed the world I invented this, but invention is a much, much longer process. So yeah, I was working on this invention from about 15 or so, and I had a couple more before that, but now I'm 23.
23. So tell us a little bit of the story behind it. So how did you even start thinking about microplastics? I mean, I know what I was up to at age 15, and it certainly wasn't sitting down trying to invent a solution to save the world.
So I actually come from Ireland, and I grew up in West Cork. Now, if anybody has been to West Cork, I don't know if you have, it's like middle of nowhere, like 2 hours drive from the airport. You get to like the end of the houses where the sea starts, and that's where I lived. So while growing up beside the seashore, all I saw was essentially the sea, the land around the sea. On rainy days, I was indoors playing with my Legos, and on the sunny days, I was outside walking along the seashore, and like that, I actually saw a lot of the plastic pollution washing up on the shore. At the beginning, actually, I just thought, it looks bad, but it's not actually bad for the environment. These big plastic bits just wash up on the coastline, and that's about it. But over time, I learned more and more of the problems associated with it, and I saw more and more plastic physically breaking off these larger plastics, ending up in the water and in the sea, and that's something that kind of inspired me to get a little bit worried and to hopefully do something about that problem as well.
In the last panel, we talked about investment, and we talked about how important it is for innovators like you to have the funding behind you such that we can eradicate plastic, whether that's removing it or just stopping it going out in the first place. What is the difference in finding investment when you're talking to an investor at 18, 19, 20? Hi, I just invented this amazing solution. Please, can you give me millions so that I can go and transform the world? How does that conversation go at your age?
Well, first of all, that conversation is definitely not easy, and I found this actually super difficult and still find it super difficult. Basically, what I first went about was trying to scale my idea into something that was feasible. So I went from this small-scale prototype where I was removing microplastics from water. For those of you who are not familiar, it's a super simple process, really. I've engineered a liquid made from a magnetic powder and plant-based oil, and when I put that liquid into water, it binds to plastic particles, making them magnetic, so magnets can come in and pick up the plastic particles. And then if you use a very specific magnetic pulsing technique, you can then actually let it release the plastics again, and like that you can actually reuse this liquid over and over to extract microplastics from water. It's the only non-filtration based microplastic removal technology out there at the moment, and it's actually one of the most effective as well. But back to your question, what I find is quite difficult when you're quite young is that people don't really believe you. They think, oh, you know, you're a little scientist. Oh, great.
So cute.
Yeah, so cool. Gucci, Gucci, goo. Here's your idea. Maybe in 5 years' time or something like that, when you have a degree or two, you know, maybe pitch it to us again. And I think something for all the investors out here listening is maybe to think not about the track record of these scientists, because, I mean, like, they're 15, right? I was, like, 15 to 18. I didn't have a track record of other, like, businesses, because, like, when was I supposed to do that, huh? So then I would recommend that you look at how driven they are and how strong a team they have. Because if these are very, very driven scientists, very passionate about what they do, and they're young, they probably are still so energetic and really, really want to make that change that they'll probably push through and get there. So that's something I would say is one criterion. And the next criterion is to see who they've aligned themselves with as a team. One of the major people actually on my team, I have a company called Fionn & Co, and we actually do for-profit installations of this microplastic removal technology. We're at TRL level 3 to 4, so we've got a working prototype, and we're actually raising at the moment in a seed round, so if anybody's interested, do meet me, also people at the back. Huh? So basically, this going from the stage of actually looking for investment as a young person is really quite challenging, and a lot of people don't take you seriously, which is a bit annoying.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate, and whilst I hear everything you're saying, and I agree that having a great team behind you is super important, isn't it a huge risk to an investor to throw a significant amount of money behind a young person with limited life experience?
Well, isn't it also a huge risk to throw a huge amount of money behind somebody who might not have a very innovative idea and is old?
You make a very good point. I'm just asking. I'm playing devil's advocate.
But no, I totally agree with you. I think it's definitely something that a lot of people will question, right? If giving a lot of money to young people is perhaps the right thing to do. And I think we should not be judging ideas based on the age of the founders or the people involved. We should instead look at the idea on like the normal criteria that any idea is judged on, right? So that might be like how innovative it is. Could it actually change the world? How achievable it is? Will this make money? Will this like have an impact? Like just the same criteria that you would use for any other startup, maybe excluding the track record of the founder, but of course still looking at the overall team. So I think we should not look at them differently.
I think the team is important, and you would look at the team in any event with any founder. And I love the idea that if it's impact investing that you're doing, then the impact comes from the possibility of that solution and how wide-ranging it can be. And if that's the core focus of the investment, then in theory it shouldn't be any more difficult, but in practice, clearly it is. So you've shared a little bit more about already how the solution works. What is your big vision? We're talking about eradicating plastics altogether. You're only 23. What is your big vision for where you can see our future going to as it pertains to plastic, or the lack thereof?
Well, I came up with this idea when I was like 15, 16, and really I was looking at this microplastic removal, so removing it from the environment. And while I think that's super important, I'm also very confident that it's not the solution to our problems, right? Like, I mean, like removing plastic from the environment will just maybe become an excuse for other people to put more plastic into the environment, which it should never be. So I think that what I would like to do, and that's why I actually study a master's in chemistry. My thesis is due in a month, by the way, so after this I'm going to write my thesis. But basically, I think it's super, super important that we try and eliminate or stop producing plastic in the first place, or if we do, treat it as a resource that's actually valuable, which it is. So not something that we throw away immediately, but something that we keep and value for a long time, hopefully like these chairs we're sitting on, then I think it's actually an okay resource to use. But if we're just looking at it as something that's very fleeting and quick, then I think that's a problem. But needless to say, don't be worried for my technology, because I think there's enough microplastic out there for me to be removing microplastic for the rest of my life. But it definitely won't be the only solution I want to bring to the table, and I'm inventing at the moment in the lab.
I'm going to shift it up a little bit. I know you recently spent 6 months in the North Pole, and you're constantly learning and diving deeper. Firstly, tell us, how did you come to say, you know what I'll do? I'll just take a little bit of time off, send myself off to the North Pole, and hang out there for a bit. How did that even come about, and then what were you doing whilst you were there?
Well, I guess the reason why I went to the North Pole, let's cut to chase here, is actually because I just love being outside and I love exploring the wilderness. And then I found, like, I was so determined to go that I was like, I need to find an excuse to go here. So I actually found a course at the Arctic University of Svalbard in northern Norway. So it's an island off the coast of Norway, 78, 79 degrees north, super far north. And yeah, I took the 6 connecting flights to go there. And then when I arrived, I started studying chemical oceanography. I did a semester at the university there. We did some research cruises, so we ice broke through a lot of the ocean, doing a lot of measurements while we were on the sea. And those measurements actually showed us how different pollutants travel in the sea and how different currents in the ocean are changing as well due to global warming. So one of the things that really stood out to me there was that basically all the ocean currents are changing slowly as the oceans are warming, because the ocean currents like the Gulf Stream and different ones like this are driven by deep water formation in the Arctic. So basically the cooling of water, the water contracts and it sucks more water from down here all the way up north. And that, of course, sucks a lot of pollution up north, too. So actually, being at the North Pole, or very close to the North Pole, made me realize that, well, microplastics and in general, all the pollution we make here is so much more magnified there. Like one piece of plastic that we release here will be joined by many more up there. And it was actually perhaps one of the most polluted places I've ever been on Earth. So remember that if you throw something into the water here, it's not just in Paris where the impact is, but it's really quite a global impact.
I mean, as you're saying that, what's occurring to me is many of us will have been to those oceans where you walk along the coastline and you see plastics washed up, and we think that's bad. Now, if what you're telling me is actually the current is taking them north and you're in the south when you're seeing this, it's far worse than we're actually seeing.
Of course, I got so horrified because basically, like the snow you have there is full of plastic. Like we would go on like, 15-day ski trips into remote mountains. Like I don't know, camping in 24-hour daylight is also a really good experience. I recommend, particularly if you have to be polar bear guard at 2 in the morning, sitting outside the tent with the rifle. But while we were even in these super remote locations, we still saw huge amounts of plastic everywhere we did a measurement. Basically, every measurement we did had plastic in it. So that kind of highlighted to me the importance of what I do, and it kind of motivated me to come back and actually do a little bit more on this field again and actually work a lot harder on these microplastic removal strategies, but also ultimately try and inspire people to stop producing plastic waste in the first place.
You said you were doing a lot of research, took a lot of data. What was the biggest insight you got?
I think one of the biggest insights is that actually the way oceans are moving and the currents are moving is changing completely. In 10 to 15 years, the way our ocean currents are going to be moving will change because the oceans are warming and changing shape, and that's all due to climate change, and that will mean that the way waste will be distributed will change too. And that will have a huge consequence on wildlife and indeed our health too. Because as this deep water formation reduces, we're going to have more and more plastic pollution, not go up to the north, but instead end up on the shores here. And I think that that's something that we should all be very worried about, because we don't want this area looking like what it looked like for me up there.
You said you've got lots of new inventions, lots of new ideas. You're now more invigorated than ever, having come back from the North Pole. How do you think we should be thinking about what are your thoughts on how we should be viewing the use of plastic going forward? Because it's really easy for us to sometimes, because we're removed from it, we're living our day-to-day lives, we're in it when we're at an event like this because we're hearing a lot about it and it's right at the forefront of our minds. But unless you're walking along an ocean and it's washing up all the time, or you're in the depths of research, it's really difficult for us to remain connected. How can we think about this problem differently as individuals, as politicians, as researchers, as inventors? What's the mindset shift you want to see us have?
Well, I think that what we should first look at is, well, what we actually need plastic for. Where is it really essential for what we do? Because I think actually if we come into a space and we say, we want to eradicate all plastics, people are so overwhelmed by the problem that they don't know where to begin, and that makes it really difficult for anybody to do anything about the problem. So I think one step at a time, keep it relaxed.
Okay.
Zen, we can do this. And then I think just looking at one small step at a time from an element of reducing or completely eliminating products. And if we can look at these single steps individually and tackle each one individually and slowly let them build up in block size until it gets more complex, I think that can have a big impact. Maybe from personal example, I know this is super basic, and something that I thought would be super basic at least, is that actually on my Instagram I run something called a Deplastify challenge, where every single week I give up one plastic item from my day-to-day life. It sounds super simple, so it could be, for instance, like let's say a plastic cup or something like that, and then I keep on giving that up after that week. You can all join me, by the way. My name is my Instagram handle. And basically, it started super simple. Now it's like a plastic writing implements, which it's so incredibly difficult to give up. So these individual products made me realize how actually difficult it is still in our current economy to give up plastic. And I think that needs to change, that it actually is possible for people to give up plastic before we start talking and pressuring bigger, or pressuring each other to do this. As a consumer, we need to try and make it possible from a higher up perspective.
I love that challenge.
Go ahead.
I said I love that challenge. Like by the end of the year, you've given up 52 uses of plastic, and you just do it once a week, add something new onto that as a really practical solution that we can all walk away with.
Yeah, so are you joining me in this challenge?
You've just put me on the spot. Am I joining him in this challenge? I am now, huh? Okay. All right, 52 days. I'm going to have to... I've been chipping away at it, but I don't think I've been going at that pace. And that sounds bad, doesn't it? One a week, so 52 items in a year sounds like pace to me. It's occurring to me that doesn't sound great. We really should be moving a lot faster than that. And I think that's one of those things that we need to keep at the top of our mind.
This week is super simple. For me, it was the plastic cup, actually. Weirdly, it was only this week that I got around to doing the plastic cup. And it was actually great, because on the train here, I was offered a glass of wine in the train. I was like, no, I can't do a plastic cup. And they gave me the whole bottle. So, this kind of
sometimes it works out.
Yes.
So, so that's on an individual level. What would you say to business owners and organizations? What little step could they be taking towards plastic-free?
Well, I think merely giving people the option to choose something plastic-free and perhaps making that a little bit cheaper would be perhaps the best step that you could take. I think so many cases it's almost like we're being forced to take a plastic product. And that's something I think that has to change. But I know that it's also not up to the business, right? I think it has to come from higher up. I think Pierre already mentioned a really interesting policy in the Netherlands. I live in the Netherlands, by the way, and there they have this policy about paying for plastic packaging, that you're paying almost a charge for the plastic that's used in packaging. And in my opinion, it's actually not working particularly well, because it's not being shown to us that that this charge is being added in very much ways, and it's too cheap. So I think that perhaps we just need to make it a little bit more expensive. Like if I have to pay €5 for the plastic packaging of my chocolate bar, maybe that'll have a bigger impact than those, I don't know, 5 cents that I now have to pay. So I think trying to incentivize people to consciously choose not to take plastic is the only way we can go forward, and that I think money is perhaps a very, very good way to do that.
So I think that'll get some business owners sort of thinking, like, how do I make, where am I making it really easy for people to pick plastic, and what could I be doing differently that would make a non-plastic alternative a better solution? What would be your message to investors as it pertains to little steps they could take to help put the funding behind, because it's a big problem, and the big problem, as we spoke about in the previous panel, we need money behind some of these solutions. What would be your word of advice to investors, or your thought on a little thing that they could do that would help to move the needle forward?
Well, I think one thing is to not undervalue youth-led ideas and youth-led projects. I think young people have this incredible ability of being able to play with ideas, right? And they might not have been tunnel vision trained into this one field quite yet. So as a result, they make often unconventional connections between completely different fields, right? I was looking at magnetism liquids with plastics in like the middle of nowhere in Ireland in my garden shed, inventing and then bringing it to a global stage. I think that meant that my idea was relatively unique, and it allowed me to file patents, etc., on this technology. And I think so many youth-led startups have this capability of being just so incredibly creative. So perhaps looking at the unconventional places to find ideas and not being scared to back even crazy ideas, I think that's the best advice I can give.
I'm also going to ask you for a small piece of advice for legislators, governments. You know, sometimes we need external forces to just channel us down the right path. Left to our own devices, we are not going to make great choices. So what little change would you like to see policymakers starting to have that will start to get us all together on a path that looks at plastic really differently?
Well, as a policymaker, I would first like to say to you guys, to policymakers, I'm not a policymaker, to policymakers, I would like to say that stop blaming the scientists. So many policymakers like to blame the scientists that the technology is not there yet, and I would like to disagree with that, because the technology is there. We have a lot of solutions that are in play. Look, we have NotPla, we have so many incredible solutions which are tackling the plastic problem. They might be a little bit more expensive, but if we give them more support and if we use them more, they will become cheaper. So don't use technology readiness as an excuse. Instead, I think perhaps actually like pulling the socks up and actually doing something about the plastic waste problem and not being afraid that it might be a little bit expensive at first is something. And then the other thing is, of course, well, what are you waiting for in getting youth involved? Young people, I think, are the people who will have to cope with this plastic problem for the longest out of everybody. So therefore, I think they need to be involved from a very, very early stage. I think that's something that a lot of people are hesitant to do, because I think some youth movements have a name for themselves in disagreeing with everything, but I think that that's perhaps just because things were not done correctly, or because they haven't been given enough voice or power. So I think that incorporating youth voices might be a really good idea in the long run.
Speaking of youth voices, last question for you. If you were a mentor to a young inventor or scientist, what unconventional piece of advice might you give them based on your own personal experience?
I think what I would say is actually forget the outcome of what you're doing. Like, don't go in somewhere with a goal in mind. If you feel like you want to solve the plastic problem, just forget that and instead see like what you actually enjoy doing. Because the invention process, only 1% of the invention process time is actually when you have a working invention. The rest of that time, you're probably doing stuff that doesn't work, or doesn't work out, or some people might even call it fail. So what you need to do is realize what you enjoy and do that. For me, that's like playing with little wires, soldering, like getting out my Lego box. Literally, I do this every day. I love this. And it's because the innovation process is really, really slow. That's where you're going to be spending most time on. So discover what you enjoy most in that process and focus on that, not the outcome, because the outcome is only one happy day, and then you're back in the innovation studio.
Fantastic. Fionn, thank you so much for joining us. Please give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is amazing.